a long time. Well, I lose things. I admit it. Maybe some of you lose things too. I've been losing things ever since I was a little kid. My mother used to just shake her head and roll her eyes and make some kinds of comments about my competency or lack thereof. If I had all the hats and gloves that I've lost over the past lifetime, I could open a haberdashery. Sometimes I've even lost my wallet, which is a little more serious, not because of the money, but because of all the cards that one needs to replace. But I think that I have raised the act of losing things to a fine art, as you will hear from this next circumstance. It happened like this. It was a hot summer day on a Sunday morning, and it was my habit to go with friends, 3 friends, out to a tennis court, and we played tennis in the morning. This morning, that morning it was particularly hot, so I took Uber since I wasn't driving at that point, and went out to the tennis court. My friends were there waiting for me. We quickly decided it was so hot that we would skip the first part of our morning together, that is the tennis part, and go have brunch at a nearby diner, which we did. So my friend took me over to the diner in her car, and I met the other friends there, and we had a very nice breakfast together. Afterwards, my friend was going to drive me back home, as was our custom, and as I got to her car, I said, "You know, I don't have my tennis racket with me." She said, "You know, I don't remember seeing that racket when I picked you up over at the tennis court. Maybe you left it back there." So she very graciously agreed to drive me back to the tennis court, and we looked all around, and there were a few other people playing tennis, and we checked with them if they'd seen anybody pick up a tennis racket or had seen the racket and the black bag that went with it, which had my cell phone in it, by the way. And they said no, they hadn't seen anything, so that was a disappointment. Well, when I got home, I went on to try something else. I called up Uber. Now, if you've ever tried to call Uber for anything other than to get a ride, you know it ain't easy. But I tracked them down, and in a little while, I sure enough got a call from the gentleman who had driven me by Uber that morning. And he remembered that he had driven me and that I had a tennis racket with me. But the racket was not left in his car. So that didn't work out. I had one more card to play. I called up the park department where the tennis court was located, and I explained the situation and asked if anyone had turned in or might turn in the near future my racket and the black bag with the cell phone in it. She said she would keep her eyes open. She hadn't heard anything yet. And in a few days I called back, and she said, no, nobody had contacted her. She contacted people, but nobody had gotten back to her about finding the black bag or the tennis racket. Well, I'd run out of cards to play. But I'm not one to cry over spilled milk. It was time to move on, and I knew it at that point. So I went out and I got myself a new tennis racket. And I contacted my phone company, and sure enough, within a few days, I had a new telephone. The following Sunday, we were again out at the tennis court, and it was not quite so hot. So we actually got to play some tennis, which happens sometimes. And after that, we went to the diner for breakfast. I had just barely gotten seated at the table at the diner when a waitress comes rushing up to me, and she said, "Are you the man that left the black bag and the tennis racket here last week?" Oh, that was terrible. That was much more embarrassing than actually losing the racket and the phone in the first place. But I gradually accepted her offer to return my tennis racket and my phone. And so there I was, back again with my tennis racket and my phone. And I also had a new tennis racket, which I like better than the old one. And a new phone, which I like better than the old one. So the story really had kind of a happy ending, except that I could still hear in my head my mother's comments, of which there were two in particular. One was, Milton, in her that Southern accent, Milton, if your head wasn't attached to your shoulders, you'd lose that too. But the other one was really my favorite. She said, Milton, sometimes I think you don't have the brains God gave the dead goose. And sometimes I'm tempted to think that maybe she was right.